Welcome, everybody, to the show. Today we're talking about literature and leadership, and specifically the topic of power. We have with us Zachary Moore. He's a current Northwestern University student and also a noted opinionist. So, welcome to the show, Zachary.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So, tell us a little bit about how you came to be here today.
Well, as you just said, I am a current Northwestern student. I am studying leadership and organization behavior. And this quarter, I had the opportunity of taking a leadership and literature course where we got to study many classic pieces of literature and analyze those pieces of literature and how do they relate to leadership and what key learnings can we use from those pieces of literature to apply today in our work life and in our personal lives as well.
Okay, interesting. So, what are we going to be talking about today? Is there something specific, piece of literature that you read in the class?
Yeah, so for this particular discussion, we'll be talking about the new movie Macbeth, just released this past Friday, Macbeth 2015. And this film is a modern day version of a classic, I would say, a classic play by Shakespeare, and some classic movies as well. And this version, I think, held true to a lot of things about Macbeth.
Okay. And anything specific that you read that you were going to be trying to kind of tie it into or make some associations with as well?
Well, yes, that's a great point. While watching the film, I started to pick up on a lot of characteristics of a book I read as well, and that book is The Prince by Machiavelli. And I think that the two, there's a lot to be learned from Machiavelli. It's almost like Shakespeare was reading Machiavelli when he was writing Macbeth, because I do believe that when you talk about the rise and fall of power, I believe that Macbeth really captures a lot of the same things from
Mm,
The Prince.
interesting. So I got to say, I went and saw Macbeth myself. I thought it was awesome. What were your impressions of the film?
I thought the film was amazing. I think it did two things very well. I think it, one, held true to Macbeth and the play and tried to fit as much as it could into the 2 hour frame. And I think keeping it 2 hours was a great idea because then it was able to um, keep the audience engaged throughout. When films get long and drawn out, they get kind of boring. So you want to make sure that you keep it action packed. You hit on the main points. There was some missing, so it wasn't identical, but I think that a lot of the key parts were kept. And then the second thing I think he did really well is um, the characters that they chose, as well as the amount of action. A lot of people are into action films right now.
Mm-hmm.
We got Star Wars releasing in a couple weeks here, and I think a lot of people, to keep their attention nowadays, you have to put a lot of action into your films.
That's interesting. So you mentioned you have to keep them engaged through action. Also, in this, this generation today where everything is so fast paced, they kept it to a short, under 2 hours of the film, but still were able to stay true. So, what are some specific ways you felt they stayed true, but that also were able to keep people engaged?
When looking at the characters, Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, Macduff, I think they didn't overcomplicate them. I think you were able to learn about those characters and their motives in that 2 hour time frame, which you really get a dive into it when you read the play. Um, and when you look at how it was set up, the order that it was set up, it flowed very nicely. I could probably summarize each scene just because it was short scenes, but they all flowed together.
So, speaking of, so today's generation, keep it short, keep it simple. How would you summarize Macbeth?
I would summarize Macbeth as a gory but beautiful Shakespeare movie with phenomenal actors and actresses.
Let's cut right to the point. Tell me about the climax.
Well, I don't want to be a spoiler, but if you've read the play, you know Macbeth dies on the battlefield, facing Macduff, who comes back to avenge his family from after being murdered by the orders of Macbeth. And you know you get there, even though if you read it, you get to that battlefield and you still just get so drawn in that you don't even know that Macbeth is about to die in the fashion that they do it in the struggle, and the story that's told on the battlefield within these actions really was very climactic.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting that you talk about that moment. Um, that's one of the characters that you do really get to know very truly and deeply is Macbeth, and you also mentioned Macduff. What else do we learn about the main characters and the way that it was portrayed in this film?
Well, let's start with the main character, Macbeth. I think that Macbeth, we learned that he is noble. He's noble to Scotland. He's noble to the king, and but he also has ambitions, and he has done a lot for his country. He's fought in a long war, and he's had success on the battlefield, and he's admired by his other fellows in the military, and he's looked upon by many. And I believe that that success that he had, he always wanted more. And when I talk about more, he wants more power. And well, we learn that he's ambitious, but he's still not overly ambitious. But he is pushed and pulled by a few different events that would draw him out to be this tyrannical leader that we learn more about as the film goes on.
And would he be so bold without Lady Macbeth?
No, no, and I think that's something that we learn, and Marie Cotillard did a fabulous job of portraying this character, Lady Macbeth, and how she's able to pull at the heart and the mind of Macbeth and convince him, give him that final push that he needed to go ahead and kill King Duncan.
Mm-hmm. Any other memorable characters?
I think we also learned a lot about Macduff and how he was able to pick up at the dinner that, in fact, Macbeth had killed the king, and it wasn't the guards. I think there was suspicion throughout when he first learned about the king's death in the tent, and I think that he also just saw in his actions and how Macbeth was unraveling and wasn't himself, and had those suspicions. But at the dinner, when he started to see Banquo's ghost and started to hallucinate in front of everyone, Macduff really picked up on that and left with his wife, and I think that was the moment that he knew who was really behind it. And then he flees to England to join Malcolm to fight against Macbeth, and he sends for his family, and his family is captured and in order to be killed, to be burned in front of everyone by Macbeth. And when Macduff learns about this, his thirst for revenge starts to show, and leads him to get to that battlefield
to act on his declaration.
To act, yes.
Absolutely. So obviously a character is only so powerful as the actor that portrays them. How did casting play a role in the development of these characters, in your opinion?
Well, Michael Fassbender's been doing a fabulous job in Hollywood. He's starting to really play some impactful roles. He was just in Steve Jobs, and now he's in this film, and he plays when he starts to hallucinate and become, sick in the mind with the scorpions, and it's just so believable that he was going through this inner struggle of someone who just created this um, terrible act of killing the king in the manner in which he killed him, and then starting to continue with those orders to show the people that he was in charge, the killings that he ordered, um, showed that he became heartless, and to have a heart and be heartless at the same time, it was really like he was two characters. It was really an amazing job.
Mm-hmm. And earlier you mentioned Marie.
Marie Cotillard, yes,
Mm-hmm.
she like always, whether it be playing a villain in Inception or playing the villain in Batman, she has this way of being um, so loving and touching, but yet she can be total opposite. So she as well did a great job playing Lady Macbeth.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you kind of brought us through the summary and the characters and the actors behind them. What would you say the overall theme of the movie meant or was to you?
For me, the overall theme really ties into power and leadership.
Mm-hmm.
We see that there was a political game as well as some individual acts of individual character coming out that really spoke to what the film and the play Macbeth is all about, and really ties into The Prince by Machiavelli.
You mentioned the prince. Please share with us kind of some of the similarities you found in reading The Prince and what you saw in the movie Macbeth.
Well, The Prince is this manuscript, so to speak, for leaders to learn how to rise to power,
Mm-hmm.
and more importantly, how to keep power once they conquer the land and conquer the people. And it was originally wrote for a leader. Machiavelli was a famous politician in Italy, and he went around and spent a lot of time with a lot of leaders. And at the end, he lost his job, didn't have much, but he wanted to offer something to his new king.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote this to Medici, and it actually opens up with a letter to Medici, and basically saying that I cannot give you, the fine things, the gold and the other things that other people with riches may be able to provide you. But what I can share with you is this knowledge that I've learned over the years of dealing with leaders and how they've been able to been very strategic.
Mm-hmm.
Some been strategic, others being not strategic, and being able to conquer different land and hold the land and the different situations that play out.
Okay. So what situations did you see playing out in the film?
In the film, how it specifically relates to the book, I believe we see that we start off with a hierarchy monarchy, and we see that the family, King Duncan, the true bloodline, has rights to the throne in Scotland, and his sons were next in line to become king. And we see someone who's a great leader in the military, like Macbeth, who desires to be king, and it is told by the fate, the three witches basically prophesies that you will be king, and this is really planting the seed in his mind, like, wow, okay, I didn't have a bloodline, but fate says that I have a right. So I believe that once that was in his mind, then it just took Lady Macbeth and other factors to really make him decide to act on it. So I believe that when you see how when different people can rise up against certain situations, obviously Macbeth was very loyal to King Duncan in the beginning, and fought for him and fought for Scotland, but in the end, because of fate and because being told that he would have this power one day, he decided to go ahead and make it sooner rather than later.
Mm. So throughout the book, The Prince, Machiavelli has certain suggestions or rules, things that he says that a great leader or a leader that would sustain should all have in common. Would Macbeth have passed the test?
Yes and no. And I will tell you why. I think he definitely followed one of the paths laid out by Machiavelli as far as how to get power, how to take a land, and in the ways in which you can do that, and the circumstances in which you should do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think where he failed was how to stay in power.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some missteps along the way that led to him not being able to stay king very long once he became king.
What would that be? So you say there are things that they must do to get into power. What would an example of that be in the film that he did right to get into power?
Well, let's talk about the way that he came to power. In the book The Prince, there's a chapter that says states won by crime.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially that's what Macbeth did. He committed this crime. He killed the king and to become king. And essentially what we learn is that, yes, in certain situations, certain examples in the past, one in the book is about one of the leaders that Machiavelli served under, which is Borgia, Caesar Borgia, and essentially how, sometimes you have to kill and break these moral laws in order to rise to power.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes these immoral acts are justified in order to take power. And that's why when the book was first released, that a lot of people looked down on it, it was actually banned, is because it was very ahead of its time, very radical, for Machiavelli to say, in order to gain power, sometimes you may have to do some things that others may find unjust or immoral. But you do what you have to do in order to get power. And we see that a lot today with corporations and CEOs and big business, but it's just what you have to do to get to power. So for Macbeth, one was committing this crime. But one of the things that you want to do is look at the structure in which you're trying to do this. Obviously, he knew that he was very close to the family. He was very close to the king and to the family, so he knew all of the bloodlines. So one of the first things he wanted to do was get rid of the bloodlines in order to keep power. But in the beginning of the film, what we see is that he let Malcolm go. He gave Malcolm the chance to run. Once Malcolm ran in the tent and saw that he was standing over the king with bloody hands, he should have killed Malcolm, unfortunately. But he let him go.
So we learn in The Prince that you most likely have to kill, and you kill quickly.
Yes.
But then you stop. And you said that Macbeth didn't necessarily get the second part right. What else did he not get right?
Well, one of the first things that he did not do correctly would be not getting the people on his side. And he did this because he tried to rule with fear. And one of the things that Machiavelli states is that cruelty in the beginning needs to be swift. It's like taking a Band-Aid off. Needs to happen, kill who you need to kill, but make it quick and move on and move past it. And as he started to play things out and start to figure out that, he would have to kill Banquo, and he would have to kill Banquo's son, and he would have to kill all of the bloodline, and he started killing these people, it was long and drawn out. And that really turned the people off, so he truly never really had the people on his side. And that's how Malcolm was able to start to build his army so quickly in order to come back and avenge his family.
Yes. Well, Zachary, thank you so much for your time and all your information on Macbeth and The Prince. It was so enlightening. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.